Heidi ho, Jen.
You're here. Heidi.
Hey ho, Heidi ho ho.
Oh my goodness.
Don't you
Hi,
like my
Wilson.
sultry radio voice? Isn't that great?
So I think when I listen, so when I hear you in my ears, it's
Mhm.
so very different than when I hear you in my ears on the phone or when we're just like, we're chatting online. Like this is different. And I'm almost like, I'm a little
Are
bit
you
like
here for it?
mesmerized.
Yeah, I should be doing some meditative work, clearly.
Yeah, you
Mhm.
really should because yeah, I'm if I fall asleep over
Ja
here and I just go, "Boom," it's your fault.
That is
Okay.
not the goal of this podcast is not sleepy time, just so you know.
You
So
know,
I'll do my best to not be so sultry that it,
okay.
like, rocks you to sleep.
Oh, good. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you, because I would
Yes.
appreciate that. I need a little jazz, a little
I'll save
loud.
my sultry for later with my
Okay.
husband. How about that?
Okay, alright,
Ah,
okay. Oh, lucky
aw,
man.
I know,
Alright, we're
right?
bringing him into this already. First
Already.
episode, and we've got your marriage coming into this
That's
shit,
right.
don't we?
Coming in hot,
Okay,
everything.
okay. Yeah, it is coming in hot. I was thinking when we started here today, it was kinda like, what are the things that we have been a part of in our lives that
Oh,
sometimes smack you across the face and you go, "Oh, what the hell am I doing?"
if I could just, smack my younger self across the face because
Mhm. Yeah.
wake up,
Yes.
wakey, wakey, eggs and
Yes.
bakey, like,
Eh,
here we go.
yes. No more
Mhm.
sleeping at night, right? Like,
Right.
I people always say that. They're like, "Okay, so if I could go back to my younger self, what
Mhm.
would I say? What would I tell them?"
Right?
Right? And it's always like, "Oh, let go of this in life and maybe do this different, and, oh, maybe you shouldn't have married him." No. I go to my younger self and I'm like, are your eyes open?
Yeah.
Like, are they open?
Are
More
you
so,
awake or are you asleep? Did you
are you
sleep through this
yeah.
part of your life?
Yeah,
What
it's like
happened?
I know. It's and here's the deal, as you and I have talked about, and we're gonna talk about on this show, right? Like, our eyes so lie to us, right? And
Mhm.
and we take in what we know. We take in what we're taught, we take in what's around us, and we're so influenced by that we lose listening to our gut, we lose like, all those things, right? And so I'd go back and be like, "Damn it, Jen." Like, maybe you open your ears, close your eyes,
Yes.
or maybe you close both of them, and I don't know, like, listen to what your gut tells you.
Right,
How about
right.
that?
How about that?
That's my yeah, I don't know,
So,
that's
well,
what I tell my
before we
younger
get
self.
started, I think we need to introduce
We do.
ourselves to our
Yeah.
audience. And
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Teralyn, and I'm here with
Yeah,
my
you
friend
are.
therapist Jen, right? And we are
Yeah!
here on the Gaslit Truth podcast. We are going to inspire, irritate. I love the irritate part.
Mm. That was a good one. Those
I
pillars,
know.
right? You came up
Yes.
with irritate, and I'm like, "Oh, yes.
Ugh.
Love it."
Yep. Offer a
Feeling
little
that one.
information, but the whole thing is to hopefully ignite some
Yeah,
change in this
yeah,
field and in some others. So,
yeah.
yeah. But first, we got to tell you who we are, what our stories are
I
along
think
the
that
way, how we got here.
matters.
It matters a
Yeah.
lot.
I
I'm
think it
slipping on
matters.
my chair. So if you guys aren't
Okay.
watching us on YouTube, you'll see me squirming
Mhm.
around in my chair here. But, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's okay. You're alright. As long as you don't fall down the chair, then I'm like, "Oh, man, I'm gonna have to call your husband." Oh god, do you have an emergency contact on
No, I
file right
don't
now,
have an
damn it?
emergency contact on file. No, I do not.
Okay, so we're gonna start let's alright, so for us, it's about why what we're saying matters, I think, is where I'm coming from a little bit with this statement, and part of why what matters is because we've been through this.
Mhm.
So our stories count here because there's something to say for the intellectual world of what we've been through, all the degrees, the
Well,
licenses, all that jazz, right?
oh, yeah. So, I mean, Jen and I are so similar in our backgrounds with education, and we
Yeah,
worked together.
we did.
We worked together in probably one of the most gaslit places to work.
Oh my gosh. And I was so gaslit, and I'm gonna tell you,
She was
I
in
was
it a lot longer than I was, I gotta say. Yes.
oh, yeah, and I stayed in it, and we're gonna talk about this because this is part of our stories, right? But Terry here was my very first mentor, okay, and we figured out the math. We did the girl math. What was that, 15 years ago?
Oh, 15 years ago. Yes.
And
Yes.
I said, "That's my girl math because I suck at math." Like, I'm gonna own this, not
God, you
from the
were so
sexist side, but
young.
God,
No, no. I'm like,
I suck at
Jen
math.
was so young when I
I was a
met her.
baby. I
So she was
was
a
a baby.
baby.
I was a baby.
Exactly. But the weirdest
Ugh.
part was is that we were, even though she was so young, we were pretty much in the same time frame of our careers because I
Yes.
was a late starter in the career. So when we first met, I we probably had about the same experience,
Yeah.
level in the career of psychology, which was
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
so she was a
Yeah.
baby. Mhm.
I was a baby, and I looked up to you because you were the mentor, right? And what's really crazy is we were very similar in the treatment interventions that we
Mhm.
delivered to our patients, right?
Mhm.
So we were both trained in working with the most significantly mentally ill and personality disordered individuals
Yeah.
in our field. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's
I
that's
always
where
say
we
we
started.
did have the most extreme training, and for that,
We
I
did.
am forever grateful for that
Yeah.
experience. Now,
Oh yeah.
within that experience, there were some things that were like, "Hmm."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so even though we started in that space, your ability to get inquisitive was much quicker than mine. So you didn't stay in the field quite as long as I did. And I think it's probably because maybe it is. I mean, there's a difference here in our ages, right? Like you and I
Mhm.
were in different stages of life even when we started working together, right? I mean,
Yes.
we're 15 years apart almost. Like,
Right. Yeah, you didn't
yeah.
have any kids at this point.
Right. I did not have any kids, and
All
you
my
were
3 were
already
all around, yep.
you were already in that world, right? So
Yep.
so it's like there's the age number, right? But your
Mhm.
intellectual age, your developing age was much greater than mine, right? And I think that's why you got out
Mm.
quicker than I did.
Well, I mean, I got into supervision quicker than you did, to be a
Yeah.
supervisor
Yeah.
faster
Yeah.
than you,
Yeah.
which is no shade, it was just something that I did, and I think
Mhm.
getting into that experience,
Yeah.
for me, was the most eye-opening. Eye-opening doesn't even feel like it cuts the mustard here, like,
Yeah.
it really shined a bright light on the problems, and I felt like I couldn't make any change that was worthwhile or valuable in the supervisory space that I was in, so I had 2 choices. I could either stay in it and kinda gruel my way, or I could leave it, and
Yeah.
I chose to leave it.
You
Which
did.
feels like a cop out often,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
because I feel like if I could have tried to exert more change, I could have helped some people in the
Mhm.
space, but I don't
Yeah.
think the space was ready for me. I don't think the space was ready for, a change agent like me.
Yeah, yeah, especially some of the individuals that we worked with, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so for our listeners, so they can understand a little bit better, it was not just us in like a private practice on an island where, like
We
what you
were
and I
kind of
do
an island.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I mean, it's a different kind of island, right? Like
Yes.
so fast forward now, you and I are in private practice, right? And
Mhm.
we're our bosses, right? We're our
Yeah.
own bosses,
Mhm.
and back then though, there was multidisciplinary approaches to things, and all those people were expected to play nice in the sandbox, but which
Mhm.
didn't happen, right?
Right.
Which in fact shut us down a lot. And so what you just
Mhm.
said, I think, is very real. They weren't ready for change agent. Those
No.
people, those multidisciplines that were there with us, and we had everything, right? We had medical doctors, we had
Oh,
psychiatrists,
yeah.
we had psychologists, we had counselors, we had social workers,
Mhm.
we had all the above, right?
Yeah,
Um,
we're also flinging around evidence-based practice at every turn,
right.
and
Mhm.
so that term in and of itself, it was curious to me because I always thought, where's the evidence that we're talking about here?"
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
it? Especially when I moved into the supervisory role, they used this huge manual. It was for drug and alcohol addiction stuff. They used a huge manual that they said, "Oh, this is evidence-based practice," and I was like, well, who did the research and where is the research on this manual?
Right.
Like what is it
Right.
was just a bunch of things shoved together in a giant binder. And so
Mhm.
that's when like, even the the gaslighting of the words evidence-based practice is like
Ooh. Woo!
she
Don't pull
blinded
at my
me with science. You know what I mean? Like
she blinded
she
me.
blinded
Oh
me
my
with
god.
science. It's
Oh my god, you're pulling on my heartstrings right now. Give me the goosebumps with that one because that's it, right? And
yes.
when you're talking, I'm sitting here going, "Gosh, was I like I was such a I was a sheep." I'm gonna
Mm.
say that
I was
all day
too.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're we started talking about you got out just a hair earlier because you followed your gut, you followed the
A lot
inquisition.
earlier. I
You did. I
but I was
stayed
I
and
was
I
only
stayed in
there
it.
for 6 years. How many years were you there?
13.
Yeah, so you
Yeah,
doubled
about
it.
13. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and you throw a unpaid internship on there. Oh, that was
Right,
fun, and, there was more time than the 13, right? So,
right.
but that was just on the books, right? Yeah.
Mhm,
So you stepped away, and I think it's important for you to talk about why you stepped away, Terry,
mhm. Oh, like
for
right
you.
now? You wanna do it
Yeah, I
right
think it
now?
is. You had to. Mhm, like, this matters. It truly does.
So, I mean, without disparaging, right, systems too much.
Yeah, I know,
We'll
right?
say too much, right? Because
Alright.
it's there's a fine line here too, right?
Yep, there
So
is.
but these are this is my experience told by me, and
Mhm.
somebody else's experience might be something different, but, when I started I was hook, line, and sinker just like you, you
Mhm.
know? What we're talking about is Jen and I both worked in the prison system, right?
Yeah. I think
And
I disclose that here. Mhm,
yeah, we actually
mhm.
worked in pretty much all levels of the prison system,
Yes.
um, along the way of our career. So in that time frame, I worked in 3 different levels of this system. But one of the most eye-opening parts, and I tell this as part of my story of change, is, we would have these multidisciplinary meetings, and we would talk about people as if they are whole people in these meetings, and then we would assign them. Yeah, whole people. She's making some hand gestures here, right? We're whole humans,
Oh, you man.
biopsych, social evaluations, the whole 9 yards, and then all that
Mm,
seemingly gets scrapped, right? For 1 intervention or 2 interventions, that kind of stuff, or a medication.
yeah.
There's nothing individual about that type of planning for somebody.
Yeah.
But the one part that stands out to me is, I was in a treatment team meeting, right? And I had brought in there was a particular client who was aggressive. A lot of them were aggressive, right? And so
Mhm.
I happened to fall across some research on how some nutritional interventions could help someone who was aggressive, and it was on omega-3 fatty acids. And I was like, this makes really good sense to me. This makes really good sense to me. So,
Yeah.
being the naive, right? Thinking like, oh, I do have a voice here. I took multiple copies of this research right into the treatment plan meeting and handed it out and was told in immediate, like almost immediate, you're not a dietitian. You
Mm.
shouldn't be talking about nutrition. And I was like,
Mm.
well, that's funny because there aren't any dietitians represented in this
We don't
total treatment
yeah.
team meeting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, I
Uh-huh.
don't I don't think it takes a dietitian to bring up some research on how omega-3 fatty acids might be beneficial to this person.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it was an immediate shutdown. And
Mhm.
that was kind of the start of it for me. Like, and it wasn't
Yeah.
even so much it was the shutting down of an alternative idea, like it wasn't just the shutting down of me, it was the shutting down of an alternative idea.
Yeah. You can't
And
have those.
you can't have
Mm-mm.
those.
No.
You
No.
can't handle the truth. I'm just gonna keep giving, like, all these things are gonna keep
Oh,
giving.
sure.
But, yeah, so, I mean, it was that shutting down of alternative ideas, and I believe that was pretty close to the time when I started looking for alternative, work sites within the organization that we were at. So,
Yeah.
that's when I applied to be a supervisor someplace else. Because I think there was some delusion. I had delusions.
You were de
I was
Terry,
delusional too.
you were delusional.
I was
It's okay.
delusional.
It's okay.
Yes.
Yeah. You can say it.
Right, I was
Oh,
delusional, and, it was the awakening of self, and maybe it was just the stage of my life that I was in,
yeah.
and I wasn't
Yeah.
really gonna put up with a bunch of shit either at this point.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I the difference between you and you were so much younger, and I don't mean to
Mhm.
keep pointing that out, but if I were your age when I started, I would have been lockstepping my way
Oh,
into this fabulous career too, you
yeah.
know?
Sure thing. It was a
Right.
sure
It
thing.
was the sure thing from
Mhm.
head to toe,
Yeah. Head to
down to
toe.
you
Yep.
retire or die. It was a sure thing.
Yes. Yep.
But I had already been in other careers, right? This was like my 3rd career.
Yeah.
So I was at this point where I was like, I need a voice here. I need a voice for myself, and not just the same voice that everybody else had.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
fast forward, I was only in that supervisory role for less than a year, because it was awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Legitimately, that was the most traumatizing time of my life, and,
You talk yes, this is why
yeah.
this matters because you have talked about this openly on your
Mhm.
socials as well, and
Yes.
you've talked about this in in other forums. You
Mhm.
were in a bad headspace.
I was in a very
That
bad
was
headspace. Mhm.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it was, this is that part where people talk about, like, what I went to the doctor to get medicated to be so I could stay working there, you know?
yeah,
And I will not forget the day that I drove home and I was like, I can either take a medication so that I can, like, stay someplace that's terrible for me, or I can step outside of this and do something different, and
yep.
I remember that day, and I remember walking into the house, and my husband was sitting there, and I said, "So I'm quitting my job." And he looked at me and he goes, "Thank God."
Oh, and
Yeah.
that see, that and it's what's this is where the universe does crazy
Mhm,
shit, right? Because that day for me happened the same exact way. Now, I
mhm.
didn't go and get a prescription and do all these things, but the day I came home and said to my husband,
I'm done.
I'm leaving the state.
Mhm.
I'm done with this." And he looked at me and he goes, "Well, it's about time." And
Yeah.
I'm like,
What? What? Right,
"Could you have said this
exactly.
13 years ago, right?" You know, and he's like,
No, but we
"No,
didn't think we had choice,
no,
and this
no,
was this
no."
was the career path, right? Like,
It was
we so I if anybody knows, it is really difficult as a new grad to get into a place where you can get your clinical hours to be licensed, because those placements are few and far between. So when you land one that
oh,
has great benefits,
and pay, and
pay,
pay, see,
retirement,
pay. Oh,
all
yeah.
of the things, like, we legitimately hit the jackpot,
We did. You
you
jump.
know?
You jump
Yeah.
2 feet and you jump hard because
Yes, you're like,
you made
"Yes."
it. You
Yeah,
made
because
it.
there's so many stories out there of people never finding clinical placements,
Oh, yeah.
So, all the
Yep.
time, and it's so when you're there, you're, like, elated because you're right, I've got a career path, and this is what it is, and then you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god, this is what it is."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the similarity of our story as you hit
Mhm.
that space in life and someone on the other side who knows you almost better than you know yourself is like, "Well, it's about time. Okay,
Yeah.
let's go." Like,
Which is
like,
really this is
yeah.
the fascinating part, Jen, because, like, I believe that I was the same age as you are right now when we both left.
Which is just crazy. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's been about a year now that I have stepped out,
Mhm.
and so so you were about 40? Is
Mhm.
that about right? You were about
That's about
40.
right. Mhm.
That's
Or
about
as
right, and
early
that's
I think I was
39, 40,
41 or
41.
something like that, yeah,
Mhm.
when
Yeah,
I actually stepped out, so, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Crazy, right? Like
That is crazy. Yeah, so your so the similarities, right? Our stories do have some similarities, and there are some things that are different. I think mine, when you were talking, mine is a little twofold. When you were talking about this idea of being shut down
Mhm.
by what was it was
Oh,
a
everybody?
psychiatrist. I
Yes.
mean everybody, but that example you
That
gave,
was a
right,
psychiatrist,
was a
yes. Mhm.
psychiatrist, and you said omegas can matter when it comes
Yeah,
to like aggression in the brain. Okay, yeah.
yes.
So that moment where you get shut down, right? I had many of those, but I
Oh,
was
there
in
was
it.
more for me too, by the way, like, that was
Yeah,
just the most pivotal.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one that
Don't
resonates
get me
with me
wrong.
too. Like I mean, but yeah, so I kind of gosh, it's hard to like pinpoint things when you're like really sitting down and thinking about
Yeah.
it, but what stands out to me, and I want to say this because we are going to have people that listen to this podcast and watch this show, and they're going to say, "So you're sitting here righteous.
Right.
You are clean. You never did any of this shit, right?" And I will
You
be
say,
the
"Yes, I
first.
am righteous." Just
Oh,
kidding.
yeah, first of
No.
all, I make the rules, honey. Thank you.
Exactly.
Uh No,
Right.
but really, like, yeah. And I sat and I think about this and I go, hell yeah, I perpetuated this shit, right? Like,
Oh.
but I didn't know what I didn't know, and so
Mhm.
that culmination of stepping into, look at, you have a job, Jen, you have
Yes.
benefits, you're like, it's like the equivalent of being made in organized crime.
Yeah.
Is it
Well,
not?
I just wanna add another layer to it. So, when I got hired in, my
Yeah.
husband had just like a year before, lost his job, and he was the breadwinner of the family, and so we were
Yeah.
financially almost ruined at the time that I got the job. So getting that
Ah,
kind of job at that time, or exactly, I was like,
yeah.
reel me in,
I
honey,
I'm
because
reeling you in. I'm reeling
oh
you in.
yeah, like I right now I need this paycheck, my family needs this
Yeah.
paycheck, like all of
Yeah.
the things, you know?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it was great. It
Yeah.
was fantastic. Yes.
Mhm.
Until it
Yeah,
wasn't.
and
Mhm.
until it was not, right? And so
Mhm.
I think about that idea of for me and you, I know that we are gonna sit here and we're gonna tell the world, there's nothing that you're gonna say to us or that you could kick back at us that we're not gonna call out on ourselves right away or agree with because you are correct, right? Like
Mhm.
it takes for everybody a little bit different to get to a space where one, you can be humble enough to say that, and two,
Yes.
be able to go, and here's what we're doing about it, right? Which is kind of
Right.
what this whole thing is us trying to give people another view, an alternative perspective, because
And voice.
it matters. And
Yes.
yeah,
And
it
giving
matters.
people voices. Mhm.
So your start of this story is similar to mine in that when I jumped in, I was 2 feet in, and I was so blind. I was hooked in by the money. I was
Yeah.
hooked in by
You
the
were
sure thing of
happy.
I
Yeah.
was happy. I had benefits.
Yes.
I had 2 babies and paid not a penny for it. And I will say that because I had these great state benefits. I did. They're
Yep.
fabulous, right? And I look at retirement and I go, gosh, I don't even have to do all these things, right? Like it was just it's there. And the other thing that really hooked me in, and it's really hard to say this, but I'm going to. All right.
Go ahead.
The the thrill of the work environment
Oh.
was like the shit you see on TV. So we worked in prisons with the most mentally ill and personality disordered individuals, right? This is what we did. And so what I was doing was this weird backwards fulfilling dream that gave me so much energy because what you saw on TV? No. I got it even
Well, and I
better.
have to say that when you mention where you work, people are
Oh,
fascinated.
they are so
They're
they
but
glom
they
onto
all
that.
just want the
They
grody
do.
stories and whatever, but
They want,
they're
yes.
yes,
Mhm.
they are fascinated, especially from the
Yes.
psychology of it. Like, how many
Mhm.
people wanna do forensic psychology because they
Oh
think
my
they're gonna
gosh.
be,
Yes.
solving
Yes.
crimes or,
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's not it, but people are fascinated because
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
behind, these prison systems, the average person never goes, right? So,
No, no, and it's dirty
so
laundry. It's dirty
yeah,
laundry, and people love dirty laundry. I loved
yes.
the dirty laundry. There was something about that. I'm, like, saying this out loud, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like, it hurts even more when you say it, and it's part of my reality, but that's what it is, and so I jumped, and I jumped with 2 feet, right? So,
Yeah.
everything I was trained in, now granted, there was very specific things you and I were both trained in because
Oh,
our
yeah.
expertise area, right?
Oh, we
So
got some great training.
we did, and it was fantastic. So
Mhm,
you and I really we were able to dive into treating, people with major depression and
mhm,
borderline personality disorder and
mhm.
major addiction. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, we did all that. I received
Trauma,
more
trauma, trauma, trauma. Mhm.
treatment, which to me that resonated with really, really well because that was real. And that
Yes,
part to me was very, very real. It still is in my private practice now.
yes,
Because that is such an important basis for things. You got to start
correct.
hitting that area, right? So we got all these really neat trainings, which was fantastic.
Mhm,
But everything that was thrown at me, it was almost like a one size fit approach. So
mhm.
kind of like you were saying, right? And I remember sitting in meetings and in trainings and going, okay, like specific trainings for interventions and I'm going, all right, so there's evidence and I'm using this evidence to give someone a treatment intervention except we're not accounting for all their history. I'm not accounting for I don't like nutritional deficiencies. I'm not accounting for
We didn't
traumas that
even
have
know but wait, I just have to say with the nutritional deficiency
yeah,
stuff, like,
yeah.
that
Oh, it wasn't
wasn't
a
even
thing.
something that we
Mm-mm.
were ever
No,
even aware
no,
of until
no.
way
But
later in
something
yes.
yeah,
But yet enough
something I've always thought of.
curiosity, right? Yeah, you have
Yes.
always been so
Right. Oh,
holistic. You were the first person that
yeah.
introduced me to Greek yogurt,
Mm, mm,
right?
mm, mm.
I was like,
That's
"What is
right.
that? What is
That's
that you're
right.
eating?" It's Greek
Oh,
yogurt.
hey, maybe we're gonna get a really great sponsor here by Greek
You may
Yogurt because this is
Greek yogurt.
okay. You
Right.
see how good my skin is because I
Yeah,
had Greek Yogurt for 15 years? Okay,
exactly, right?
okay. Right, right, but that was it. The one thing about me that I remember, the gut feeling that we were just talking about when we kind of forgot about that and didn't get inquisitive, for me, it was on this idea of exercise, because that was
Mhm.
part of my life and my world, like, constantly. And not that the system we work for didn't allow that to come in. It did. I mean, we had recreation activities that
Mhm.
the people the inmates would participate in, right? Like, we
Yes.
had some of those more movement type activities, but it only went so far in terms of how much weight that carried in their treatment.
Right.
So for every like 1 hour of exercise or movement a week you could get, we're going to throw 20 hours of a intervention that is
Right.
evidence-based
Right.
at you. Right? So
Sitting. Sitting
yes.
in a
So
classroom. Yeah.
I hated, so that was the part of the gut part. That's when I had some of my aha moments, kind of like when you're shut down, right? Like, and one of many, right? But that was mine. And fast forward to saying then, so I did perpetuate some of this because I was in it, and I kind of lost inquisition. Like
Yeah.
I did. I
Well, when
what
you get
came at
to be fair though,
yeah.
when you get shut down so many times or your ideas fall on deaf ears, you tend to not bring them up anymore.
It's
You
it's it's true. Yeah,
you
it's, I
know,
mean, how
when you
many
get the
times? Yeah.
curiosity beat out of you, not
Yeah,
literally, but,
it's true. It's
the
true though. And
curiosity
so,
beat down.
but yeah, but what does it do? It makes us small. So we get
Yes.
smaller, right? Like
Mhm,
we just shrink. And so I thought I wasn't shrinking because I've always had a voice, right?
mhm.
Like I had a supervisor at that place that we worked at who said to me, Jen, you have got to find that fine line between assertive and asshole, because you're coming off like an asshole all the
Yeah.
time. And I kept thinking, "Okay, okay, I understand." But typically when I would be that asshole, right, air quotes for those of you listening here, it was because I was bringing something up that I didn't think was quite right. And it was more than just a subjective feeling for me. It was more about, why don't we ever look at this or at this? Because I understand we're in an unsafe environment in a prison, which we are. Safety protocols were so important. They kept people
Right.
alive, but they
Yeah.
also hindered crap out
Right.
of everything we did. I mean,
Mhm.
I was scared straight from day one that if I shared anything
Oh,
personal with a client, guess what? They're showing up at
meanwhile,
your
you're
front door.
walking around with a
They're
pregnant belly,
right.
like,
They're showing up
that's
at your
pretty
front door,
personal.
Jen. Yep,
Yeah.
you're dead. You're done
Yeah. Yep.
because you don't share personal stuff. And
Nothing.
yet here I was with my whole life out. Right, right. There's a great example.
Mhm.
Twice in the
Yes.
prisons, pregnant. Like, if
Yeah.
that's not the most vulnerable real state of
Oh my
something, I don't know
gosh.
what is. But I couldn't share that stuff. And we were taught from the jump that if you did, listen, you are going to get wrapped up. An
Mhm.
inmate is going to take advantage of you and you're done. That goes, like, the inability to have like a shared experience and rapport right
Yes.
there. That goes against everything that we learned, which is so
Oh,
important. Like,
well,
okay,
even my clinical supervisor, which I really liked, she said, the biggest intervention that you can have, the biggest change agent is that therapeutic relationship,
yeah,
and you are not allowed to have one,
no,
there.
mm-mm,
Like,
no, you're
I
not.
mean, to a certain level, right? Like
Yeah,
little bits, but not, you couldn't. Like, we
no,
wouldn't even wear most of us wouldn't wear wedding rings because we didn't want them to
right.
know if we were married or
Yes.
not married or,
We yes.
all
Yes,
those
keep
things, right?
all the things. I mean, I never shared a single thing about myself.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, no wonder I couldn't even get some of these individuals, right, to even, because I couldn't even, there was nothing real about me.
Right,
I was fake from the jump, even though I didn't know it, right? And I
right,
thought I was being super real.
right.
All the time. I was like, well, Jen, this is Jen. She's candid, she's real. Like, you're gonna know everything about her, right? Like,
Mm-mm.
but you don't actually.
No.
It was like I was, oh, like gaslighting myself. Like, no wonder I didn't know who I was when I stepped away a year ago, right? So we fast
Mhm,
forward right to my second thing of my story, which was the walk away, just
mhm.
like your walk away, which is what matters, right? Like, I hit a point in my career similar to you,
Yeah,
which is where I started to become like super apathetic. And what I enjoyed, I stopped enjoying. I stopped taking care of myself. My family didn't know who I was. I couldn't tolerate life. I was depressed. I was anxious. I couldn't even be present for my kids because
yeah,
my mind couldn't be there. It couldn't stay, right? I started drinking more. I stopped sleeping. Sleep became a secondary thing. Like, the things that mattered to me, that are important: nutrition, exercise, sleep, like mindfulness, mental health stuff, out the door.
Nothing.
And I
Mhm.
slowly started to just fall, and yet I was rising in my career. You know,
Right. What a
I
weird
was
juxtaposition, right?
it
Like
right? I was rising, like, I had went from my role, I promoted. I'd hit
Mhm.
that role, within that role, I promoted to other roles, and I was getting groomed for the next role, and
Yes.
I was good at it, and I was miserable as
Yes.
fuck.
Yes.
Oh my god.
I feel
And
like
so
we
say
both
yeah,
walked
right?
away with, an extraordinary amount of trauma.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
Yeah, the I cannot ever I do tell my clients this sometimes, like, when we're talking about trauma, right, and,
Mhm,
to validate where they're at, I can say, "I understand that piece, like, there's things I
mhm.
will never be able to unsee,
Yes,
ever,
or
ever," and I still
unfeel.
see them. Unfeel,
Mhm.
unhear,
Yeah.
it's there, unread, the things we read,
Yes. Oh
the
my
things
god.
that we were exposed to, every single day. I can't undo and
From
unlearn that.
day 1 of my practicum, because I did my
Yeah,
practicum in the system as well,
yeah,
and, day 1, I remember a big stack, "You gotta read all these files because 'cause we're gonna go into
yes.
group," and I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, well, alright, like, let's start reading." I'm reading these files of these men and of their victims and I'm crying my eyeballs
Yeah,
out, like,
yeah,
literally moments before walking into a group, and I remember thinking that it's like week number 1, I can't do this. There's
mhm,
no
yeah.
way. There's no way
Yeah,
I can do this.
do you remember when you and I did, all the psychopathology assessments?
Yes.
And we would sit with the psychopaths, and we were being trained, right? Like,
Which
in
is
the
why
in
I just have to bring this in, which is why social media is so goddamn annoying when it comes to, psychopaths and narcissists, because
Mhm,
our
mhm.
experience with them is the real deal, right?
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's interesting because people and I don't wanna take anything away from people and negate the
No.
experience they have, but we were in it. Like, our job was to actually assess those
Mhm.
individuals using the best assessments that were out there, which, by the way, Robert Hare, you know what? You never made it into the DSM. Psychopathology never made it as a diagnosis, and I give and you know what? And we're gonna talk more about that in the future because we
Mhm.
know why. We know exactly why he couldn't make his mark in the DSM. Back backtrack, I digress. I can't get too far ahead, but that was it, and when you just said files, I thought about sitting in your office with you, and we were going through part of the training that we had to do was you combed through. The file review
Files.
took longer than the interview, and we
Yep.
went through stacks of files, reading every single little thing about that individual. Like, talk about taking a holistic, wide lens approach to looking at someone. We
Yeah,
knew it all.
which is why I have to say, one of the last positions before I promoted into supervisory position, I did, psych assessments,
Yep.
and I loved it because you
Yeah.
actually got to dive into somebody's whole life and make recommendations for their whole life. However,
Yes.
I know today, if I were to do those assessments again,
Mhm.
the results would look vastly different.
Oh, right?
Because the result,
Yeah.
the recommendations would have more components, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Exercise,
They would.
nutrition, they would have a lot more components.
Yeah.
But again, when you are in a box, you have to deal with what you've
Right.
got, right?
What you've got. Yes.
Mhm, what
And
you've
that's
got.
what we're given, right? And that's what we were given. And so that's what I went with. That's what I knew. So
Mhm.
kind of same thing, same kind of stories, right?
Do you
Here
know,
we
I mean,
are.
you sparked something in me real quickly. I
Oh, oh
when you
good.
yes, when you said,
Urgh.
what'd you say? No, you have to learn how to be,
Mm.
no,
What did
assertive,
I
but not
Oh,
an
an asshole. You
yeah,
can
but
be
not an
assertive, but you
asshole,
can't be an
right.
asshole. There's a fine line there,
There's a fine
Jen.
line. So,
Yeah.
it's funny because, like, at one point when I was there, somebody had told me because it was right after a treatment team meeting, they said, "You're one of the most negative people that I know." And looking back on that, I was like, I was advocating.
Oh.
I was a big advocate for a lot of things, and so I would nitpick in those meetings, and I would bring
Mhm.
up inconsistencies, and I would bring
Yep.
up things, and now I did then I studied, positive psychology and stuff like that after that because I was like, "Well, maybe I am because I did ask a few other people, and they're like, "Yeah, I
Gosh,
can see
you
that,"
you did. You trained me
Yeah.
in that shit too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you did.
Yes.
I forgot
I
about
wrote my whole
that.
dissertation on it, but that's why, that's where that came from. But now just
Ah.
today in that moment, I'm thinking maybe that was just part of the awakening,
Listen,
of,
yeah, it is. You
you
were
know,
being silenced. Like,
right.
right? So the voice, how we are made small, right? So
Mhm.
look at that, how you were made small in that moment. So you were dismissed, you were shut down, and then you internalized and went, okay, well then I gotta go fix myself. So I'm gonna
Yes,
go get trained in all this other shit.
I did,
But really you
100%,
did
and I'm gonna
what?
write original research on it, by the way,
My
like,
gosh.
yes,
Oh,
swam down the
Terry,
rabbit or
listen,
dove
this
down the
is
rabbit hole.
we just
Mhm.
went all the way down, like, you're
Yes,
down, you're in it. But
yes.
that was a no, you that was a good pause. You take those more often when they come to you because this is gonna happen to us too as we're sitting here talking with people. And I know those people that are listening to us, they resonate with this.
Mhm.
Like, you're made to feel small, you're
Yes,
shut down, you
yes.
don't matter. So you do get small, then you blame it on yourself, you internalize it, and
Mhm.
then you go try to fix it when in reality,
Yes,
there was never a problem. You were seeing something from an alternative view.
right,
And that alternative view is not supported. So guess
right.
what? It's gotta go.
Well, and that fast forwards into private practice too, because I've been in private practice since 2012,
Mhm.
full-time since 2012,
Yep.
part-time since 2010, and, that whole thing translates because then the next phase of my career was born out of listening to the average consumer, right? The average
Mhm.
person,
Yeah.
listening to them getting sicker and sicker on more and more psych meds, and they're still sick, they're still
Yeah.
depressed, they're still anxious, there's still all these things. So
Mhm.
I was again thinking, okay, I'll just be my own boss and that'll solve this whole thing. That did not solve this whole thing, you know?
What?
I know. I'm always
Damn it.
looking for the quick fix here, and
I
it
know.
just never rolls
Who
in
is
my
yeah,
direction.
what yeah, but you should. I mean, we're conditioned to look for the quick fix,
Seriously.
right? Like, life is
Yes,
a sprint, you get to the end, and the marathons suck, we're not doing it, it takes too much time, too much work, and it's actually pretty dark. The marathon is pretty damn
it's
dark.
pretty damn dark. It's
It's
pretty
and
dark.
that's the underbelly of the truth, right? Like, that's what we're doing here, right? Like, that's
Yes.
exactly what it is, right? And so then you step out of something that is so structured and it's like, "Okay, this is gonna be better because 'cause I'm my boss now." So I have
Yeah.
less I'm not in the middle, there's less competition, things I have to deal with, but then you sit there and you do all the things and it's like, "Huh, okay, there's people still aren't getting better."
Well, I'm like, exit the system. Enter a new system, insurance companies, big pharma, like, all this
Oh,
stuff, like, it was
yes,
like this
yes.
exit, "Yay, I'm
Mhm.
free.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm trapped again." Like,
Oh,
"Oh,
man. Okay.
no."
Okay, we're not all right, we're not trapped.
Yeah.
We're not trapped.
We're not trapped.
No, but you are though, it's that feeling,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
But within that feeling, then comes where we are now, where you are now, right? Where some of our people listening and watching this are now, right? Is something's not right. I know it. I'm gonna look at this differently. I'm gonna do something differently, or I'm actually just gonna start to think about it.
Right.
Really, because that's kind of the start too, is
Mhm.
to start to get inquisitive about some of these things that you've been through and how
100%.
yeah, how
Mhm.
those systems and the environments do this to us.
We've
So that's
lost we've lost critical thinking, and it's always fascinating to me because I remember I think it was in my bachelor's program, which is, when we were also learning how to make wheels and set fire,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
anyway, uh
caveman,
yes,
caveman.
I had
Fire,
to I took a
stick.
class in critical thinking way back then. There was a whole course I took on critical thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I was like, "That's cool." I don't see those courses anymore. Like, I don't see anybody having an entire course on critical thought. And
yeah,
so I
no,
think, social media and things like that, like, they serve us algorithms that are like, "Oh, you're interested in this? Here, become
yeah,
really interested in this." Really
yeah,
don't think anywhere else. Become interested in this one way of
yeah,
thinking. And I think
yep,
that's often the way we view mental health, psychology, things like that. That's just
yeah.
this one line of thinking and it's going to solve it all,
It's gonna solve the
and
problem. It's the
yeah,
fix.
and that is
It's the
not the
fix.
truth. That's not the
Yeah.
truth. Hmm.
No, it's not at all. So that is where we're at here, is to help bring that to people. And also in this episode to say we were in it too.
Oh,
So
man.
we were
Mhm.
so in it and still to this day we are in it in certain
Mhm.
ways because I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but I'm going to do everything that I can do. But at the same time, I can't just step fully away from what I'm doing because I have to pay the electricity or they shut that shit off on
Right?
you.
I
Did you
know,
know that?
right? Like, it's really a weird thing. It's a weird thing,
It's
you
not
know?
fair, but we can't totally step out either because we have we you know
We're
and I
people too.
we are people too, but maybe being in both of it and acknowledging it, but then being able to give
Mhm.
people this other piece is what we can
Right.
bring because that's really what it's going to be about.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
let's
So, yeah,
quiz
so
it then.
our goal number 1 was just this episode of, sharing who we are, where we came from, and that we are as far from perfect as
Hmm.
ever, and we have
Hmm.
been involved in things that are gaslighting. We've been involved in things because we thought it was normal. It was
We did.
just what we're trained to do,
Yeah,
and that's the unfortunate gaslit truth.
it is. That's the shitty gaslit truth. But it feels good to talk about it and to
Yeah,
acknowledge it.
it does.
Yeah.
It's kinda
Yeah.
freeing.
So it is kind of freeing. I
Mhm.
like that. So we
To address one last thing before we sign off, is this
yeah.
whole idea of deep throat. Okay, so
Oh,
we
let's
we
talk.
we have to talk just quickly about it because my husband hates it. Your
My
neighbor
neighbors hate
hated it. Yeah, all of it. If you guys don't know what deep throat is, it's not the porn thing called deep throat because I think that's what people associate it with.
Oh,
If
it's
y'all
not?
rem if you
Oh,
no, we're
where have
not
I
we're
been?
we're
Okay,
not. I don't know what's
just kidding.
happening. Anyway, it is, do you remember Watergate? Does anyone remember Watergate? You know?
Now I can say I do and I know about it even though I'm a baby.
Well, it was
Yeah.
historic. I mean, it was a historic time. And
Yes.
it was a huge government conspiracy thing and the
Yeah.
informant who was called themselves Deep Throat as the informant.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's why we're going to deep throat
We are.
the
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
And I'm glad you explained that because we also don't want people to think that, this whole thing is some crazy, weird, fans only sexual thing here. Like, okay, it's not.
Yeah, it's not, it's not. So,
But
yes,
that's
we
yeah.
are the whistleblowing informants who are
Yeah.
going to
And we're in
deep
it. Yeah.
throat some of this truth. So,
The shit out of it.
if you wanna catch more of us, we do have on Instagram at the Gaslit Truth Podcast
Yeah, we do.
and on YouTube, the Gaslit Truth Podcast. You can
Yes.
email us at
There you go.
thegaslittruthpodcast@gmail.com. I will
There
get
you
that
go.
all out in one. We wanna hear from you.
Yeah,
And so
we
make
do.
sure you like, follow, subscribe, and comment, but share us your stories. We wanna know.
Yeah.
We wanna
Yeah.
know your experience in the mental health and health world. And yeah, that's a wrap on
Is
episode
that a
1.
wrap?
That's a wrap.
All right.
Thanks for being here.